Welcome to Health Unlocked, where simple, science-backed health is made easy. Let's get started. Sleep is often treated as optional, a luxury we can cut back on when life gets busy. But what if I told you that sleep is one of the most powerful weapons your body has against cancer? In this video, we'll explore groundbreaking research shared by Dr. Matthew Walker, Professor of Neuroscience and Psychology at UC Berkeley, and Dr. Peter Attia, physician and longevity expert. Together, they reveal how sleep directly shapes our immune system, influences cancer risk, and even alters the genetic activity inside our cells. We'll look at controlled experiments in humans and animals, epidemiological data, and the biological mechanisms that connect sleep loss to cancer development. By the end, you'll see why the World Health Organization has gone so far as to classify night shift work as a probable carcinogen. Let's begin with one of the most striking demonstrations of how quickly sleep loss can cripple your immune defenses.
They took a group of healthy adults and they limited them to just 4 hours of sleep for one single night. And then they looked at a set of cells called natural killer cells. And you can think of natural killer cells like the Secret Service agents of the immune system, in that they're pretty good at identifying dangerous foreign elements, one of which are malignant cancerous cells. They'll inject some things into them and try and destroy them, essentially. So what you want is a pretty virile set of those immune assassins circulating in your body. And what they found is that one night of 4 hours of sleep reduction led to a 70% drop in natural killer cell activity. That's quite a surprising state of immune deficiency that has happened within one night. So you can step and repeat that and imagine what would be the state of your immune system, particularly for those critical anti-cancer fighting immune cells, after several weeks, if not months, of insufficient sleep.
Dr. Walker's description is staggering. Just one night of restricted sleep, 4 hours instead of a full night, leads to a 70% reduction in natural killer cell activity. These cells are frontline defenders against cancer, constantly patrolling for abnormal or malignant cells. Think about that. In less than 24 hours, your immune system's cancer surveillance is crippled. Now imagine repeating that night after night. The cumulative effect could leave your body wide open to cancerous growths that would otherwise be destroyed before they ever became a problem. But this isn't just theory. Researchers have tested the impact of sleep loss on cancer growth directly, using animal models.
Took a group of mice, inoculated them with some cancer cells on their back, and then gave that cancer a 1 month period to grow. And at the end of the month, he resected the skin, measured the size of the tumor. Half of those mice were allowed to sleep normally. The other half had their sleep restricted. So they just had their sleep kind of top and tailed, not total deprivation, just limiting their sleep in the morning and the evening a little bit. What they found is that at the end of that 1 month, those underslept mice, when they looked at them, the tumor was 200% larger. I mean, it was physically distorting the body. And if you were to see these pictures, you would just think, my goodness, I can see a small, tiny little sort of dot that is the growth of the cancer in the well-slept mice. The others, it just looked like a hideous, mass on these underslept mice. Secondly, what they found was that cancer in those underslept mice had actually metastasized, which is just, in some ways a fancy way of saying that it had breached the original origin and started to invade other organs, bone, as well as brain. And when cancer becomes metastatic, that's when we know things can get really dark and grim in terms of life expectancy. They looked a little bit at the mechanism. They found that macrophage M1 cells, those were actually downregulated by a lack of sleep. And what was upregulated was a sort of a rogue version, which was called the M2 cells.
This experiment shows the devastating consequences of chronic sleep restriction. The tumors in sleep-deprived mice didn't just grow faster, they grew 200% larger and even metastasized, spreading to bone and brain. Dr. Walker highlights a key mechanism, the balance of macrophages. Normally, M1 macrophages help fight tumors, while M2 macrophages can actually promote tumor growth. If you're enjoying this, hit subscribe so you don't miss more health insights. Sleep loss shifts this balance in the wrong direction, tilting the immune system toward cancer promotion rather than defense. This is a chilling reminder that sleep is not just about feeling rested, it's about maintaining the biological systems that keep cancer in check. But what about humans, and how does this connect to the broader question of why cancer risk rises so dramatically with age?
One of my favorite sort of sitting around dinner discussions with cancer biologists is, what is the greater driving force for the obvious age association of cancer? In other words, why does cancer increase non-linearly as you age? And I offer two hypotheses. Is it three, actually? Is it an increase in the rate of mutagenesis? Yep. Do you experience, on a per unit of time basis, a greater insult to the genome? Two, if you assume that that's the same, is it that over time the accumulation and the expression, the phenotype of that becomes more problematic? And or three, is it that our immune system, specifically the adaptive immune system, is weakening and the balance starts tipping in favor of cancer? And, I've asked this question of Nobel laureates and future Nobel laureates. Every one of them has said, we don't know. They suspect it's all of the above, but they all agree that the weakening of the adaptive immune system is almost assuredly playing a role in why we get cancer more as we age, because we know many things are working against us when we do that. And so when I hear you say NK cells, which, the CD8 cell, the NK cell, the CD4 cell, these are your Green Berets and your Navy SEALs of the war against cancer. If you put a hit on those guys, you could be taking a 10-year step in the wrong direction.
Correct.
Just as you talked about the gonadal 10-year leap, right?
Yep.
With testosterone.
I would love to add a 3B hypothesis there, which is that one of the most dramatic changes with age and the most sizable and robust physiological changes with age that we see is that your sleep gets worse. And sleep is probably one of the most powerful regulators of your immune system. If you want a full arsenal and you want every single weapon in there to be sharp and ready to annihilate, sleep is what you need. That data, I think, is very clear in terms of the decimation of your immune system with sleep.
Dr. Attia frames the central mystery: why does cancer risk rise so sharply with age? Mutations accumulate, immune defenses weaken, and the balance tips toward disease. Dr. Walker adds a critical insight: sleep quality declines with age, and since sleep is one of the strongest regulators of immune function, this decline may be a hidden driver of age-related cancer risk. In other words, poor sleep may not just be a symptom of aging, it may be one of the reasons aging accelerates cancer. And the evidence linking sleep loss to cancer risk is not just experimental, it's epidemiological.
So firstly, what we know is that there are now significant links epidemiologically between sleep and cancer of a variety of forms. Currently, that list includes cancer of the bowel, cancer of the prostate, and cancer of the breast. And then we can step down.
Which are basically three of the top four.
Exactly. Yeah, three of the heavy hitters. Next, you can sort of say, okay, what about the causal evidence? Well, firstly, I would say, before I describe the causal evidence, that causal evidence is now so strong that recently the World Health Organization decided to classify any form of nighttime shift work as a probable carcinogen. Their words, not mine. And the proof of evidence that is required by the World Health Organization to make such a statement usually has to be astronomical.
The World Health Organization does not make such declarations lightly. For them to classify night shift work as a probable carcinogen means the evidence is overwhelming. The disruption of circadian rhythms, the suppression of melatonin, and the weakening of immune defenses all converge to increase cancer risk. This is not just about lab experiments, it's about real-world consequences for millions of people working night shifts around the globe.
So here in this experiment, you're not going to have your sleep deprived for an entire night. You're simply going to have your sleep restricted to 4 hours for one single night. And then we're going to look to see what's the percent reduction in immune cell activity that you suffer. And it's not small. It's not 10%. It's not 20%. There was a 70% drop in natural killer cell activity. That's a concerning state of immune deficiency. And you can perhaps understand why we're now finding significant links between short sleep duration and your risk for the development of numerous forms of cancer. So you may have heard of that old maxim that you can sleep when you're dead. Well, I'm being quite serious now. It is mortally unwise advice. We know this from epidemiological studies across millions of individuals. There's a simple truth. The shorter your sleep, the shorter your life. Short sleep predicts all-cause mortality. And if increasing your risk for the development of cancer or even Alzheimer's disease were not sufficiently disquieting, we have since discovered that a lack of sleep will even erode the very fabric of biological life itself, your DNA genetic code.
Notice how Dr. Walker repeats this finding across different talks. A 70% drop in natural killer cell activity after just one night of short sleep. The consistency of this message underscores how central this result is to our understanding of sleep and cancer. But the story goes even deeper, down to the level of our genes.
So here in this study, they took a group of healthy adults and they limited them to 6 hours of sleep a night for 1 week. And then they measured the change in their gene activity profile relative to when those same individuals were getting a full 8 hours of sleep a night. And there were two critical findings. First, a sizable and significant 711 genes were distorted in their activity, caused by a lack of sleep. The second result was that about half of those genes were actually increased in their activity, the other half were decreased. Now, those genes that were switched off by a lack of sleep were genes associated with your immune system. So once again, you can see that immune deficiency. In contrast, those genes that were actually upregulated or increased by way of a lack of sleep were genes associated with the promotion of tumors, genes associated with long-term chronic inflammation within the body, and genes associated with stress and, as a consequence, cardiovascular disease.
This is perhaps the most profound finding of all. Sleep loss doesn't just weaken immune cells, it rewrites the activity of your genes. Over 700 genes are altered after just 1 week of restricted sleep. The genes that are switched off, those tied to immune defense. The genes that are switched on, those linked to tumor growth, chronic inflammation, and cardiovascular disease. In other words, sleep deprivation doesn't just make you tired, it reprograms your biology in ways that actively promote cancer and other chronic illnesses. So what have we learned? 1 night of short sleep can cripple your natural killer cells by 70%. Chronic sleep restriction accelerates tumor growth and metastasis in animal models. Aging, cancer, and sleep are deeply intertwined, with declining sleep quality potentially driving immune decline. Epidemiological data links poor sleep to cancers of the bowel, prostate, and breast. The World Health Organization now classifies night shift work as a probable carcinogen. And at the genetic level, sleep loss distorts the activity of hundreds of genes, silencing immune defenses while activating tumor-promoting pathways. Dr. Matthew Walker's message is clear. Sleep is not optional. It is one of the most powerful tools we have to protect ourselves against cancer. As you reflect on this, ask yourself, are you giving your body the nightly defense it needs? Or are you unknowingly weakening your immune system's ability to fight cancer before it even begins? The science is clear. Sleep is not a luxury, it is a necessity for survival. Thanks for watching Health Unlocked. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more expert-backed health insights. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.